Welcome everyone. My name is Yvonne Delis de Jesus, and I am a NIO psychology student at Albizu University. Thank you for joining me today. And this training session is titled Effective Team Dynamics, Empowering Teams to Collaborate, Perform, and Thrive. Throughout this session, we will explore what makes a team not only functional but connected, resilient, and high performing. Whether you're a leader, a hiring manager, or someone who works within a team, the ideas we're going to be covering today are relevant to you. Every person contributes to the climate, communication, and culture of a team, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. By the end of our time together, you'll have a clear understanding of how teams form and evolve, what challenges get in the way of collaboration, and what strategies help teams build trust, communicate effectively, and consistently perform at their best. So take a breath, get comfortable, and get ready to engage because today we're not just talking about teamwork. We're building better teams. So are you ready? So buckle up and let's begin. I hope you enjoy the session. In today's agenda, we will begin by establishing the foundation of what makes a team and the importance of intentional development. Next, we will explore two valuable models that illustrate how teams grow and why certain patterns emerge. We're going to be discussing about Tuckman stages and building team roles. After that, we're going to discuss practical methods for building communication and trust within teams, as well as common challenges that teams face. We will then move on to strategies and tools you can implement immediately, followed by a mini reflection activity, and then we will conclude with a short assessment. So by the end of this session, my hope is that you will leave with valuable insights and actionable steps you can take. So at the end of this session, you will be able to explain why team building is so important. You also recognize common challenges that teams face, and you will learn how to use research-based frameworks to understand how teams develop. More importantly, you will leave with practical strategies to enhance collaboration, regardless of whether you lead a team or contribute as a team member. So what exactly is team building? Team building is often misunderstood as just activities or fun exercises. According to research, team building is more strategic, and one of their classic definitions per Werner in 2021 describes team building as a planned intervention designed to improve how teams function and solve problems together. Now we're going to explore four core components that make team building effective. And this source was found from researcher Lazarenza in 2018. So researchers have identified four core components that make team building effective. The first one is goal setting. That means that teams perform better when expectations are clear and goals are both challenging and specific. Even something simple like agreeing to meet twice a week creates a shared accountability. The second one is interpersonal relationship building. This focuses on trust, communication, and conflict resolution. Many studies connect trust directly to better collaboration and lower conflict. The third one is role clarification. Team struggles when responsibilities are unclear, so clarifying roles helps reduce confusion and overlap, which improves efficiency. And the last one, the fourth component that make team building effective is problem solving. This helps teams identify obstacles, develop solutions, and improve decision-making processes together. In fact, a meta-analysis by Lazarenza and colleagues in 2010 reviewed over 60 studies and found that team-building interventions significantly improve cognitive outcomes. For example, like shared understanding, affective outcomes such as trust, and process outcomes like coordination. While team building didn't always instantly boost performance, these improvements sets the necessary foundation for stronger performance over time. In other words, audience, team building isn't about bonding. It's about creativity, structure, clarity, and connection so a team can function at the highest potential. Why team building matters? According to a 2025 Gallup report, employee engagement in the United States is still low. Only 32% of employees are truly engaged in their work. That means almost 7 out of 10 employees are mentally checked out. In other words, they're doing the minimum or simply counting down the minutes until the workday ends. And this is very costly. Gallup estimates that disengagement costs in the United States roughly are $2 trillion every year. Do you know that amount? $2 trillion every year. That cost shows up in turnover, burnout, poor communication, decreased collaboration, and lower performance. Now that we already discussed all these numbers and percentages from Gallup, you will ask, what's driving this disengagement? Many employees report feeling disconnected from their workplace. They are unclear about expectations and they reported that they feel unsure whether their work actually matters. In fact, 51% of employees are either actively job hunting or they also reported quietly scanning for other opportunities. That tells us that retention currently in 2025 is still fragile. So where does team building fit into this picture? Team building helps address the challenges identified in the data, things like communication, connection, belonging, and clarity. Effective team building focuses on strengthening relationships of trust and a shared purpose. In other words, effective team building makes people feel connected not only to their task but to each other and the mission of the organization. When teams feel supported and connected, we see higher retention, better performance, stronger morale, and a workplace where people feel like they belong. As a recap, we already discussed why team building matters. Now we're going to learn the difference between teams and groups. And there is a distinction between the two. Not every group of people is a team. We interact with groups constantly, in classes, in workplaces, friend circles, and even waiting rooms. A group is simply two or more people who influence each other while interacting toward a broad purpose. The connection might be minimal between those two terms, and collaboration may not be required. On the other hand, a team, however, is different. A team is a more structured and intentional form of a group, one that relies on coordination, collaboration, shared accountability, and interdependence. So if you can see in this graphic, I summarized the difference between teams and groups. On the left side, you see teams. So one of the characteristics of a team, as a summary, is that they share a specific goal. But when you compare to groups, group means two or more people who influence each other. Another difference is that teams collaborate in a coordinated effort, while groups, their collaboration is minimal. Another key difference between teams and groups is that teams share accountability, while groups' performance results from individual contributions are focused solely on that. So teams work toward a specific shared goal and rely on each other's skills to get there. In other words, researchers describe the difference like this. In a group, just to make it more simple, in a group, performance comes from individual contributions, and in a team, performance comes from both individual effort and shared work produced together. So a good way to remember these terms and the difference between the two is that groups work near each other and teams work with each other. So now that we already discussed the difference between the two, let's make a quick pause for a moment and let's think about the last project that you work on. So I have a question for you, audience. Did it feel more like a group or a team? So now imagine 4 people assigned to create a presentation. If each person works separately and someone merges the files at the end, that's a group. But if they brainstorm together, communicate, coordinate roles, and create the final product through joint effort, that is teamwork, and that's where the difference comes. So now that we clarify the difference between groups and teams, the next logical question is, how do groups become teams, and how do teams become high-performing teams? On our next slide, we're going to be talking about the Tuckman's model that will explain and answer this question. Before we walk through Tuckman's model, it helps to know a little about the person behind it. In this slide, you see the picture of Bruce Tuckman. He was an American psychologist whose work focused on how groups grow, interact, and become effective over time. In 1965, he published one of the most influential frameworks in team psychology, and it's called the team development model that we're going to be explaining in our next slide. But to tell you more about the team development model, this model was originally included 4 stages: forming, as you can see, storming, norming, performing, and later in 1977, Tuckman expanded the model to include the 5th stage called adjourning to represent that disbanding phase once a team completes its purpose. Today, his model is still widely used in workplaces, education, leadership training, and team development programs because it offers a simple and memorable way to understand how teams evolve. Tuckman help explain why teams don't magically work smoothly on day one. So raise your hand, you that are in the audience, raise your hand if you ever work on a team where people were polite at first but awkward later. Also, if you have worked with a team where conflict showed up later and eventually things started to click. If you have experienced like these scenarios, guess what? Congratulations, because you already lived in the Tuckman's model that we're going to be explaining more in detail in our next slide. As I explained in our previous slide, the Tuckman's model is one of the most influential models used to understand how teams first introduced in 1965. So as you can see in this image, this is the actual Tuckman's model. So in Tuckman's original research, it shows that most teams don't just appear fully functional. According to Tuckman, teams evolve to predictable stages as they learn to collaborate and communicate. Originally, Tuckman identified four developmental stages, as we explained in our previous slides, but we're going to be covering that more in detail, and which is forming, storming, norming, and performing. Later, he added the fifth stage, adjourning, to acknowledge what happens when a team completes its cycle, its work. So we're gonna be talking about each stage more in detail. The first stage is forming. So forming is the very beginning when the team first comes together. There is often uncertainty, politeness, and a strong desire to make a good impression. I'm not sure how many of you, when you have started a new position, a new job, you are currently at that forming stage, right? Where uncertainty, politeness, and a strong desire to make a good impression, those are the characteristics of forming. So in this phase, people are trying to figure out who are these people? What is expected of me? How do I fit in? There is typically low conflict during that stage, but also low clarity. Team members may avoid difficult conversations while they observe different personalities and working styles. During this stage, leaders play a key role. And the first key role are providing structure. The second one is defining goals, clarifying goals, and establishing initial expectation. During the forming stage, emotions here often include excitement, curiosity, and a bit of anxiety. Second phase is storming, and this is often the most challenging state. Conflict, disagreements is one of their characteristics, power struggles. In that phase, they begin to surface. People may question decisions, challenge leaderships, or push for their preferred way of operating. So in this stage, it's sometimes very uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Storming allows individuals, according to Tuckman, to express opinions, negotiate expectations, and work through misunderstandings. And without this phase, a team remains polite but dysfunctional beneath the surface. Leaders at this stage help the team learn healthy communication, active listening, and constructive conflict resolution. The third stage is norming. And one of its characteristics is that once teams work through conflict, they begin to norm. This stage is marked by increasing stability, trust, and collaboration. In this stage, team members develop shared routines, agree on rules and roles, and begin aligning around common goals. In this stage, communication improves and the focus shifts from individual identity to team identity. Members feel more accepted and confident sharing ideas. So in this norming stage, it is important for leaders to often step back slightly in this phase, shifting from directing to facilitating because the team is becoming more self-sufficient. The next stage is performing. And at this stage, the team functions at its highest potential. Collaboration flows smoothly. People understand one another's strengths, and conflict, when it occurs, is handled constructively and quickly. And not every team reaches this level, but those that do experience strong cohesion, autonomy, and a clear focus on shared results. Team members feel in this stage more confident, motivated, and connected to the purpose of the work. The next and fifth stage is adjourning, which Tuckman later added as a final stage. Adjourning sometimes is called mourning. This stage occurs when the team completes its task and prepares to disband. Team members may experience in this stage mixed feelings, pride, and accomplishment, but also sadness or uncertainty. It is a period during the adjourning stage of reflection, closure, and transition. Therefore, strong leaders are encouraged to create a space to celebrate achievements and help members move smoothly into new roles or teams. So now that I have explained every single stage in more detail, why all this matters and why nowadays the Tuckman's model remains so important and so relevant. Tuckman's model reminds us that teams don't become high-performing overnight. That's something that we need to keep in mind. Teams grow through phases of uncertainty, conflict, alignment, and maturity. Why this matters? Because understanding these stages helps normalize challenges. There's no perfect team, people, especially during storming. And storming gives teams a roadmap for improvement rather than assuming that something is wrong. Because in reality, growth often looks like progress, pushbacks, progress again. It doesn't work as a straight line. So with this being said, I'm inviting everyone to reflect. So let's think about a team you're currently part of. It could be the team at your work, a school, or a personal team. Now I invite everybody to start thinking in which stage of this model, of the Tuckman's model, best describe what is your team today? Now that you have learned every single stage in detail. So let's go to the next slide. In the next slide, we're going to be talking and exploring how teams grow and develop over time. And we're going to be talking about the Belbin's team's roles more in depth. Now that we already explained the Talkman's model, I will recommend you guys this video. Is by Impact Voice Coaching. And the clip is related to this movie, famous movie, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And the clip shows a powerful moment from this movie. And we all understand that the movie is a fantasy movie, but it clearly demonstrates team formation, much like real organizations do. So at this point, just to give you a brief context, leaders from different groups in the movie, like men, elves, dwarves, and hobbits, have gathered for a serious decision. And they were in this conflict. What should be done with the One Ring? In the video, each person in the room represents a different background, represents people from different values, and in some cases, a long history of conflict. And just like in the workplace, the fact that everyone is gathered for the same goal doesn't mean they automatically agree on how to get there. So the movie, the forming stage in this clip, we see a calm and a structured environment. Everyone sits quietly and listens, and the problem is explained. This reflects the forming stage, that moment where a group comes together, explores the purpose, and evaluates the others in the room. In this stage, there is curiosity, caution, and observation. Roles are not clear yet, and everyone is polite. Soon after this clip, the tension rises. Opinions clash, voices get louder. Each group believes their solution is the right one. The discussion becomes emotional rather than rational, and this chaos represents the storming stage, where disagreements, power struggles, and identity surface. No one is wrong in this moment. They simply have different worldviews and priorities. And this phase is necessary. A team that never storms simply avoids the hard conversations. Just like many of us have experienced in real teams, conflict is often the turning point, not the breaking point. And then in the middle of the conflict that you will see on this clip, something important happens. Frodo steps forward and says he will take the ring. His willingness to take responsibility, even though he's not the strongest, most experienced, or most obvious choice, creates a turning point. The room suddenly quiets, the energy shifts, the group redirects from arguing to aligning. And this is the norming stage, where clarity emerges, roles begins forming, and collaboration becomes possible. After Frodo speaks, others step forward, one by one, not in competition but in support. Sam joins first, then Aragorn, then the rest of the group. Suddenly, they are not separate races or factions, they are the fellowship. This marked the performing stage where collaboration becomes purposeful, coordinated, and shared. The goal is now bigger than individual preferences is shared. Do you remember the comparison that I did between teams and groups? So in this stage, the performing stage, there is a team like collaborating as one. And again, I recommend this clip for everyone. And the last part of the clip shows magistrally the adjourning in a symbolic way. In the film, the meeting ends and the fellowship prepares for its journey, while the full emotional separation happens later in the story. This moment represents the beginning of a journey, which means the transition from planning to action and from discussion to execution. So many of you may ask, right, why I'm using this example. I'm using this example and this video from Impact Voice Coaching, which I totally recommend for you to watch, because this scene captures something universal about teamwork. Teams don't magically form just because people sit in the same room. Conflict is not a sign of failure, it's a step towards clarity. Leadership is not always positional. Sometimes it comes from courage. Like in the example, Frodo wasn't a master, but he shows leadership by showing up courage. Sometimes we think that leadership it relates to titles, but it's not. And the moment a team aligns around purpose, everything shifts. So I hope you watch the video whenever you have the opportunity. And I also hope that you already have a better understanding of how Tuckman's model works. And personally, I have an understanding why it's still relevant in today's modern workplaces. So now that we already explore how teams grow through the Tuckman's model, the next question becomes, who makes up a team and how do individual strengths shape team performance? And this is where Meredith Belbin's work becomes especially meaningful. And Meredith Belbin was known as the father of team roles. If you see in this PowerPoint slide, there is a picture of him alone with the team roles framework that we're going to explain in depth on the next slide. So just as a quick introduction, Meredith Belbin is a British researcher who in the 1970s studied team behavior at Henley Management College. His goal was to understand why some teams with brilliant individuals fail, while others with average ability excel. Meredith, through years of observation, assessments, and performance tracking, discovered something very surprising. He discovered that team success wasn't about intelligence or expertise alone. It was about behavioral roles. In other words, how people naturally show up and contribute in a team setting matters more than any kind of qualifications on paper. What makes this framework so important and so relevant in today's organizations is because there is a core message behind the team's roles framework. The core message is that teams performs best when members bring different strengths, not when everyone behaves the same way. On the next slide, we're going to be explaining more in depth about the amount of different strengths that makes people and teams perform at their best. On this slide, we're showing Belbin's team's roles. Belbin identified 9 distinct team roles, grouped into 3 major categories: action-oriented, people-oriented, and thinking roles. Each role represents a different way someone contributes value to a team, not based on job title or training, but based on natural patterns of behavior. Before I enter more in detail into this discussion, I invite everyone in the audience to start thinking about in which category, right, you naturally thrive, as I explain in detail in the next second. So let's begin. The first category is called action-oriented roles, which is this one depicted on red. And this category focuses on movement, urgency, and execution. The shaper is the person who pushes the team forward and challenges delays or stagnation. They're often the person saying, okay, enough talking. What's the plan? The next one is the implementer. The implementer takes ideas and turns them into structured plans with real steps and timelines. Meanwhile, the completer finisher, which is this one right here, is the person who ensures everything is polished, accurate, and completed to a high standard. They are the person who notices the small details no one else catches. These 3 roles help transform ideas into real action. So now the second category that we're going to explain includes the people-oriented roles, which support relationships, collaboration, and communication. The coordinator is that person that helps the team stay organized and aligned by clarifying goals and delegating work appropriately. The next one is called the team worker. The team worker plays the role of the builder, the harmonizer, is that person that supports others and maintains a positive morale. This is often that person who sees tension and tries to ease it before conflict escalates. And finally, we have the resource investigator. This kind of person is enthusiastic, is curious, is constantly exploring new connections, ideas, and resources from outside the team. Together, these roles help maintain connection, motivation, and psychological safety. Now it comes the third group, and it's called thinking roles. And this group pertains to people who are focused on creativity, strategy, and problem solving. So at first we have the plant, and the plant is the creative idea generator. It's the person who thinks outside the box and brings fresh perspectives. Then it becomes the monitor evaluator that brings logical reasoning and analytical thinking, helping the group evaluate ideas realistically. And last, the specialist that provides deep expertise or technical knowledge that might be essential to the task. These roles help ensure that the team has strong ideas, critical thinking, and the expertise needed to move forward effectively. The most important takeaway from Belbin's framework is that no single person can or should try to cover all 9 roles. Each role serves a purpose, and none is better than the other. A well-rounded team works because differences complement one another. When a team understands that those collective strengths, they can communicate more effectively. Teams can anticipate challenges sooner and work together with greater clarity and intention. So before we move on, I'd like to take a moment and let's think about a team now that I explained all 9 roles. Let's take a moment and let's think about a team you have worked with recently. And this could be work, school. And clearly, now that I explained the 9 roles, start thinking. I invite everyone to start thinking which roles may have been missing. That awareness alone can change how we understand how teamwork is. So before we move forward, I would like to do a reflection assessment. So if you can please, let's take a pause, and I'm gonna allow everybody a moment to reflect individually. In this slide, now that we already discussed the team roles, there are 3 questions that I would like everybody to reflect, to pause and reflect. The first one is, which role feels more natural to you? The second question is, when does this strength help the team? The third one is, when it might create challenges. So again, look at these roles that we already discussed, and you can, as you read the questions, you can start reflecting or choosing one role that feels the most natural to you. And just to give you a quick help, is that role that you have that tendency to step into without being asked. Again, there are no right or wrong answers. This is just simply a moment of self-awareness. So if anybody in this audience would like to raise their hand and share that role that they chose and what are the things that stood out for you, again, this is the opportunity. The key isn't changing who we are, it's mainly about understanding how we can use our tendencies intentionally in a team context. Now that we explore how teams develop and how individual strengths contributes through Belbin's role, let's pull everything together and look at what actually helps teams thrive in real organizational settings. Based on research. Research shows that successful teams are not just groups of talented individuals. They have intentional conditions in place that supports collaboration, communication, and shared ownership. According to Levi and Askay in 2020, thriving teams tend to have clear goals, supportive leadership, organizational resources, and mutual accountability. They also highlight that teams perform best when tasks require coordination and when team members have the interpersonal skills to work together. This is not just technical expertise. So let's break down the core elements that helps teams succeed. So if you can see in the slide, clear goals and shared purpose, is one of the most consistent predictors of team effectiveness. In other words, having a clear and shared understanding of what success looks like. So when team members, as an example, when team members know the mission, expectations, and desired outcomes, decision making becomes easier and collaboration becomes more focused. Levi and Askay note that teams are more motivated and perform better when the task is meaningful and requires collective effort rather than individual work. In other words, people work together, guys, when they know why their work matters. Number 2 on this PowerPoint slide is define roles aligned with strengths. So we also know what teams thrive when members understand their roles and how those roles complement one another. And this concept is directly connected to Belbin's research. So when individuals are able to contribute based on their natural behavioral strengths, teamwork feels smoother and conflict decreases because expectations are clearer. Role clarity reduces confusion, overlap, and frustration, which makes collaboration more efficient and psychologically safer. The third characteristic supported by research that helps teams thrive is open communication and coordination. According to research, thriving teams communicate openly and frequently and intentionally. Levi explains that high-performing teams shift between planning together and executing individually while monitoring progress as a group. Communication is not just about talking. It includes listening, asking, clarifying questions, giving feedback, and adjusting when new information emerges. The fourth one is trust and psychological safety. This is one of the most powerful elements of team success is trust and specifically psychological safety. How many of you in this audience have heard this term before, the term psychological safety? According to Edmondson's research done in 1999, shows that psychological safety is the belief that a team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And this means that people feel comfortable asking questions, suggesting new ideas, admitting mistakes, or disagreeing respectfully. Those are characteristics of teams that have psychological safety. But later, there is a study done in Google, part of Google's project Aristotle, found that psychological safety was the #1 factor predicting whether teams were high or low performing. Without it, people stay silent, not because they don't know the answer, but because they don't feel safe contributing. And the last one is organizational support. So finally, thriving teams exist within environments that supports them. Levi and Askay emphasize that organizational culture, systems, and leadership needs to reinforce that teamwork through resources, information, and feedback, and by rewarding collective success rather than only individual performance. Leaders in thriving teams do less directing and more facilitating, creating space for the team to self-manage and collaborate. So, in summary, when we look at what helps teams thrive, it's not just luck, it is about strategy, it is about structure, it is about clarity, communication, psychological safety, and support. So when these elements are present, teams don't just function, they grow, innovate, and perform at a higher level. Now that we explore the most common barriers that get in the way of effective teamwork, the important part of this learning is how to overcome them. So right now, I'm going to explain, based on research, some strategies to overcome common barriers. So the first one is create clarity, especially around roles. This is one of the easiest ways to reduce confusion and prevent conflict is by clarifying roles and expectations. And this doesn't have to be complicated, and it can be as simple as asking team members, for example, who is responsible for what? Role clarity is vital. And another question that you may ask, just to ensure that there's clarity when it comes to role and expectations, is what decision does each person own? Who needs to be consulted and who just needs to be informed? Using these kinds of frameworks, like Bell-Bean's teams roles, can help teams understand not just responsibilities, but natural strengths. So when people know their lane and respect others, lanes teamwork feels smoother and more coordinated. The second one is communication habits. Most communication problems don't come from lack of ability, and they come from assumptions. So teams can improve dramatically by building small habits like checking for understanding, summarizing decisions, asking questions instead of assuming, scheduling short alignment check-ins. Communication doesn't have to be constant, but just consistent, clear, and intentional, so everyone in the team is able to understand. And the third one is foster psychological safety. As we talked earlier about Edmondson's research, this is where it becomes more practical. To build psychological safety, it is relevant for leaders and team members that model behaviors such as admitting mistakes, asking for input, saying, I might be wrong, what do you think? Respecting different opinions. So when people feel safe to speak up, teams learn faster, adapt better, and make stronger decisions. The other one is called share leadership based on strengths. So in other words, instead of relying on the former leader to solve every problem, thriving teams distribute leadership based on strengths and context. And I'll give you an example of this. The specialist leads when technical expertise is needed, while the coordinator steps up when organizing work. The shaper leads when deadlines require urgency. So this flexibility empowers members and uses everyone's strengths rather than relying on one person. And the last one is recognize and support contributions. So thriving teams are characterized when effort is acknowledged and contributions are visible. Recognition builds trust, motivation, and belonging, especially in hybrid or remote settings. Supportive cultures don't just celebrate results, they celebrate effort, collaboration, and growth. So as a quick reflection, if you could choose one strategy, what will make the biggest difference for your team? Is it clarity? Is it communication? Is it psychological safety? Is it shared leadership or recognition? I invite everyone to start thinking and select which one will it be. Before we wrap up, we're going over the topics covered in today's session. So we begin by defining what teamwork really means and why team building matters in modern organizations. We also look at two important frameworks, which was the Tuckman stages of group development, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, and also Belbin's team's roles, which help us understand how individual strengths contribute to collaboration. Then we explore what helps teams thrive, including psychological safety, clear roles, shared purpose, communication, and support from leadership and the organization. Finally, we examine the common barriers that can get in the way of effective teamwork and practical strategies to overcome them. Overall, audience, the message is simple. Strong teams don't just happen, they are intentionally built through awareness, communication, and trust. So as you leave today, I encourage you to reflect on one question. What is one thing I can do differently to help my team work better together? Even one small action, one conversation, one check-in, one acknowledgement can shift the culture of a team. Well, this is the end of our session. I want to thank everyone to have taken the time to attend this training session. I know it's almost 60 minutes. And I want to thank you for your participation and also your openness to participate in these activities. As you can see in the slide, I'm leaving a QR code where you can easily use your phone and scan. The code will take you to a feedback survey, and I encourage everybody to participate. Your feedback of this training is really important because it will help improve future learning experiences. And thank you so much for your time again, and I hope you leave with insight, curiosity, and confidence to build stronger teams. Thank you.